All right, everyone, there's now a little bit of a trend where people are blaming, and this was totally predicted by 100% of everyone doing political commentary, blaming Sliwa for Cuomo losing against Mamdani in the New York City mayor's race. This is completely fucked up. No, this is not a thing. If you were to take every single Sliwa voter in the final tally and add them to Cuomo's total, he would still have come in behind Mamdani. It would have been very close, but he still would have come in behind. Now, about the only argument you can make is that if he had dropped out maybe 2 or 3 months ago and directly endorsed and then campaigned for Cuomo, then you could probably have gotten over that threshold. I mean, it'd be less than 20,000 votes actually. So, yeah, you could probably have gotten that, but it was never going to happen. And this is why I told people that Mamdani was going to win, because Sliwa is a Republican. This would be a non-starter because a lot of his voters never would have voted for Cuomo either because he's a Democrat. So there was no feasible way he could get across that threshold. The real reason why Cuomo lost was mainly because of his disorganized and very insular campaigning style. So while Mamdani, I mean, he's a commie. I'm not giving him praise or anything, but at the very least, campaign style fashion, he went out, he directly engaged with voters, he went to restaurants, and he went to shopping malls, and he went everywhere else to parks and shit, and he campaigned nonstop. He gave a lot of speeches. He did a lot of sort of meet and greet sort of things. And so even though it's greasy used car salesman tactics, most of the public is easily taken in by that sort of thing. A handshake and a grin, as Depeche Mode might say. That's basically the way, I mean, it's politics. The politicians, no shit. Most of them are corrupt and greasy car salespeople. Yeah, I know, nobody ever suspected that. Cuomo, meanwhile, sat in his office most of the time and just probably sat there sulking and, relied upon other people to put up signs that in many cases were never really being put up. And this is true. I've spoken with people who live in New York City. They're like, well, I barely see any Cuomo signs. And it's been pointed out he had far fewer events. He had far fewer interactions with the public. And it reminds me of another election, actually, the 2012 election between Obama and Romney. Mitt Romney was about 50-50 with Obama for a very long time. In fact, some of the polling at a few points showed him mildly ahead. There were plenty of states that were winnable that he didn't end up winning. Why? Because in the last couple of months of the campaign, he almost disappeared. He did fewer events, he gave fewer speeches, he wasn't interacting with people for an extended period of time. Basically, he was ceding the election at that point, which led to Karl Rove's epic meltdown over Ohio on Fox News that live election night. I will never forget it when he stormed off and then was berating several staffers. That was a pretty funny night. And basically, it was no choice 2012, so I don't lament the fact that the GOP lost then because Romney versus Obama, who gives a shit? It really doesn't matter who's in charge because they're both retarded. Sliwa, though, is certainly not responsible for this. Had he gotten out months ago, directly campaigned, then it would have been very, very, very close. Cuomo probably could have pulled it off. But he was under no onus to do so. He's not from the same political party. And in the end, without dropping out, even if he had dropped out at the last minute and said, vote Cuomo, even if every one of his voters followed his directions, it would not have made a difference. The election result still would have been the same. It just wouldn't have been as wide a gap. To his credit, I suppose, Cuomo can say, well, at least I came within a single-digit margin, despite the fact that the communist was being astroturfed everywhere and I never bothered to campaign. And I'd be, again, surprised if Cuomo didn't end up running on the I told you so ticket in the next mayor's race or something like that. Maybe Eric Adams will throw his hat in the ring again. Maybe Sliwa will too. He'll have a redux. It'll be hilarious. We'll see what happens. He didn't cause, I mean, this is not, this is like people are comparing it to Ross Perot or something like that. There have been instances in the United States political history where there have been spoilers. You'd think of Teddy Roosevelt deciding to wheel around and turn on his friend Taft, crushing him, and actually made him cry several times through his insults by running on the Bull Moose ticket and simply laying waste to the GOP at the time. You'd think of Theodore Roosevelt or something like that. There have been instances of this where there are genuine spoilers. This is not one of those instances, though, because if you look at the final margin, it wouldn't have even mattered. And the idea that 100% of his voters would have flocked to Cuomo simply because he said to do so is asinine. Some of them probably would have gone to Mamdani at that point and said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to vote for the communist because clearly the Republican Party here ain't for me because they're supporting Cuomo, whom I hate. Some of those people genuinely hated Cuomo and probably would have ended up preferring Mamdani in the end. It is entirely possible. More of them probably would have just stayed home. So, I mean, calling Sliwa a spoiler is completely, it's completely messed up. It's totally wrong. It doesn't comport to statistical or historical fact in any meaningful sense. You can see the results for yourself. All you have to do is do the math. Add all of the votes that Sliwa got to Cuomo's total, and you still come in a bit behind. Again, it would just have been like a 51-49 proposition. This was, by the way, a winnable election for Cuomo. He could have won. All he had to do was campaign harder. But he didn't do that. In the end, more than half of the New York population that bothered to vote voted for Mamdani. New York City now has to suffer as a result of this. But if you're suffering, it won't just be because of Mamdani. And it won't be about Sliwa at all. It'll be about Cuomo's style of candidacy. You run an Al Gore campaign. It's basically like taking a biplane up against an F-16. It ain't gonna work, dude. F-16 will probably just fly right through your plane and just crash into pieces without even firing on you. There's nothing that you can do. You're using a Neanderthal-style campaign in the age of flight, in other words. You're like a bunch of cavemen looking up at an airship or something along those lines. That's basically the kind of campaign that he ran. So it's mostly Cuomo's own fault. It's also the fault of New Yorkers for not turning out against the communists, but the alternative is just a stale neoliberal anyway, so really, again, it reminds me of 2012. Yeah, do you want to drink arsenic or cyanide? He'd rather not drink either one. In my case, I probably would have just bothered voting for Sliwa just for the hell of it, knowing full well that he would lose, just so that I didn't have the stink of having voted for a communist or a stale uniparty neoliberal. But New Yorkers chose otherwise. It's the way that it is. That's about all. Peace out.